1842 hours local time, Islamabad, Pakistan. The tarmac of Nur Khan Air Base erupted in chaos as the Iranian diplomatic motorcade shattered the speed limit to reach the waiting aircraft. They were not just leaving, they were fleeing. Exactly 20 hours of secret negotiations had just collapsed into dust. And now, thousands of American sailors are staring down the barrel of an unprecedented regional war. Run the numbers with me. 3 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, 250 strike fighters, over 3,000 vertical launch cells loaded with the most lethal munitions ever designed. The cost to deploy this armada exceeds $30 billion. The enemy they face uses drones that cost $20,000. For every dollar the enemy spends, American taxpayers spend thousands to defend. But the math of danger goes far beyond dollars. It is about time. 38 minutes. That is the exact flight time of a Shahab-3 ballistic missile from Iranian launch pads to American bases in the region. A 25-to-1 advantage in firepower means nothing if you cannot intercept the swarm. And the swarm is coming. But here's what the mainstream reports are missing. The media wants you to believe this was just a diplomatic hiccup. They claim the sudden departure of Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi was standard procedure. It was not. Araghchi fled to Oman because the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued a recall. The ceasefire framework is completely dead. United States President Donald Trump abruptly canceled the scheduled trip of envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. The message from Washington was delivered not in a closed room, but broadcast to the world. If they want to talk, all they have to do is call. Too much time wasted on traveling, too much work. That is not diplomatic posturing. That is a commander drawing an absolute red line in the sand. And that was the moment everything changed. Prior to this total collapse, Iran refused direct negotiations. They insisted Pakistani officials act as intermediaries. Araghchi sat down with Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. He met with Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir. He outlined Iran's ultimate red lines. But those red lines were unacceptable. They were designed to be rejected. Iran never wanted a ceasefire. They wanted a delay. They needed time to position their assets. They needed time to arm their proxies. And what they did not know was that the Pentagon was watching every single move. But look closer at the naval deployments. The United States military did not just send a message. They sent a terrifying wall of steel. 3 aircraft carrier strike groups are now operating in the same theater. This is the first time 3 American carriers have deployed to this region in 23 years. The last time this happened, an entire regime was erased from the map. Think about what that means. The USS Abraham Lincoln, the USS Harry S. Truman, the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Each Nimitz-class carrier displaces 100,000 tons of sovereign American territory. Each one carries a crew of 5,000 American sailors. That is 15,000 lives on the line, and they are not there for a training exercise. Inside the Combat Information Center of an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, the radar operators are locked in. They are monitoring the AN/SPY-6 radar systems. These radars have a detection range exceeding 300 nautical miles. They can track hundreds of targets simultaneously, and they have to, because the threat environment is saturating. But look at the Iranian Revolutionary Guard crews manning those fast attack boats believe their own propaganda. They believe speed and numbers will crash through American defenses like a tidal wave. They plan to swarm the American destroyers, 30 or 40 speedboats armed with heavy machine guns and anti-ship rockets. But they are about to face the most sophisticated killing machine ever deployed at sea. The SM-6 Block 1A Interceptor. Each missile costs $4.3 million. It flies at Mach 3.5. It can reach out and kill a target 150 nautical miles away. That is the distance from New York to Baltimore. Before the Iranian boat crews even know they have been detected, they are already dead. But there is a fatal flaw in this strategy. Run the numbers again. A destroyer carries 96 vertical launch cells. A carrier strike group might have 3 or 4 destroyers. That is roughly 400 interceptors. What happens when Iran launches 500 drones? What happens when they fire 1,000 cheap ballistic missiles? The math suddenly turns against the most powerful navy on Earth. You cannot win a war of attrition when your shield costs 200 times more than the enemy's sword. That is a bankrupt strategy. No nation on earth can afford to win that way. And Iran knows this. That is why they activated the Second Front. On April 25th, a separate ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah completely deteriorated. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a direct order. The military was commanded to vigorously attack Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. This is not a coincidence. This is a coordinated ignition of the entire Middle East. Hezbollah possesses an arsenal of over 150,000 rockets and missiles. They are the most heavily armed non-state actor on the planet, and they take their orders directly from Tehran. But here is the detail that should terrify everyone. On that exact same day, April 25th, Iran did something inexplicable. They resumed commercial flights from Tehran's international airport. For 2 months, the airspace had been restricted. Now, they are scheduling routes to Istanbul, Muscat, and Medina. Why open the airspace when war is hours away? It is a calculated human shield strategy. By filling the sky with civilian airliners, they complicate the targeting solutions for American and Israeli stealth fighters. The radar screens will be cluttered with civilian transponders. One mistake, one misidentified radar track, and you have a tragedy that turns the entire world against the coalition. Think about the American personnel on the ground. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Camp Arifjan in Kuwait, Naval Support Activity, Bahrain. Tens of thousands of American troops are stationed within the weapons engagement zone of Iranian ballistic missiles. The Patriot missile batteries are on high alert. The THAAD systems are scanning the horizon, but defense is never perfect. If a swarm of 200 Shahed drones and 50 Fateh 110 ballistic missiles is launched simultaneously, some will get through. The concrete bunkers will shake. The alarm sirens will not stop screaming. And that is exactly what the Iranian delegation in Islamabad was waiting for. They used the diplomatic talks in Pakistan as a smokescreen. Abbas Araghchi posted on social media that he shared Iran's framework to end the war. He claimed he was waiting to see if the United States was truly serious about diplomacy. It was a brilliant deception. While he smiled for the cameras with the Pakistani Prime Minister, the missile crews in the Zagros Mountains were fueling their rockets. They were programming the GPS coordinates of American barracks. But American intelligence is not blind. The sudden cancellation of the trip by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner was the ultimate countermove. Washington signaled that they saw right through the trap. They refused to put high-level envoys in a vulnerable location while an attack was imminent. The diplomatic channel was severed because the military channel was already opening. Let us look closer at the mechanics of this global blockade. The United States Navy cannot physically board every single ship on the ocean. They rely on intelligence. They rely on the automatic identification system. They track the dark fleet. These are the ghost ships. Rusting oil tankers that turn off their transponders to smuggle Iranian crude oil to sympathetic buyers. The Defense Secretary's order changes the rules of engagement. If a ghost ship refuses to stop, it will be disabled. If it resists, it will be sunk. But what happens when a Chinese-flagged tanker refuses a boarding order from an American destroyer? That is the flashpoint that could trigger World War III. Iran does not fight alone. They have powerful partners who rely on their cheap, sanctioned oil. A global blockade does not just starve Tehran. It angers Beijing. It frustrates Moscow. The United States is playing a high-stakes game of geopolitical poker, and they have pushed all their chips into the center of the table. The same carrier strike group doctrine that dominates the open ocean is now being tested in the confined, treacherous waters of the Persian Gulf. A Nimitz-class carrier needs room to maneuver. It needs wind over the deck to launch its F-35C stealth fighters. In the narrow waters of the Gulf, maneuvering is restricted. The threat of coastal defense cruise missiles is absolute. The Noor anti-ship missile skims the waves at Mach 0.9. It carries a 165-kilogram high-explosive warhead. If one of those impacts the flight deck of an American carrier, the damage would be catastrophic. The flight operations would cease. The ship would become a burning island of steel. But the United States Navy has a countermeasure nobody talks about. The Phalanx Close-In Weapon System, the last line of defense. It is a radar-guided 20mm Gatling gun. It fires 4,500 rounds per minute. When the SM-6 misses, when the Sea Sparrow misses, when the electronic warfare jammers fail, the CIWS wakes up. It operates autonomously. It tracks the incoming missile and throws a literal wall of depleted uranium in its path. It is terrifying to watch. It is even more terrifying to rely on, because if the CIWS is firing, it means the enemy is only seconds away from impact. Put yourself in the boots of a 19-year-old radar operator sitting in the freezing air conditioning of the Combat Information Center. You have been on watch for 12 hours. You are drinking terrible coffee, and suddenly the screen lights up with 30 hostile tracks. You do not have time to call a committee. You do not have time to debate foreign policy. You have seconds to relay the coordinates to the tactical action officer. Your voice cannot shake. Your hands cannot tremble. The lives of 5,000 sailors depend on your ability to read a glowing green screen. This is the reality of the collapsed ceasefire. The politicians have left the room. The diplomats have fled on private jets. Now the fate of the region rests in the hands of the military commanders, and both sides are locked in an escalation spiral they cannot control. Netanyahu is striking Lebanon. The Houthis are launching anti-ship ballistic missiles into the Red Sea. Iran is seizing commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. And the United States is tightening a global blockade while aiming 3 aircraft carriers at Tehran. But there is one final piece to this puzzle. Why did Iran flee Islamabad exactly when they did? Why not wait for the American envoys and stage a public walkout? Because the element of surprise was fading. Iranian intelligence realized that the United States knew about the impending swarm attack. The deployment of the 3rd Carrier Strike Group was the giveaway. You do not send 3 carriers to negotiate, you send 3 carriers to annihilate. Iran realized their trap had been discovered. They ordered Araghchi to evacuate before the airspace was locked down. We are now entering the most dangerous phase of the conflict. The preparation phase is over. The diplomatic phase is dead. We are in the execution phase. Over the next 48 hours, the world will hold its breath. Will Iran launch the preemptive strike they have been planning for months? Will the United States Navy fire the first shot to enforce the global blockade? Will the skies over Lebanon fill with the smoke of 1,000 intercepted rockets? The pieces are all on the board. The diplomats have failed. The weapons are armed. 3 aircraft carriers are cutting through the water, ready to unleash hell on Earth. But as the clock ticks past midnight in the Middle East, one terrifying question remains. When the first American missile leaves its silo, who will be the first to fire back? To answer that question, we must look not at the capitals of recognized nations, but at the sprawling, decentralized network of proxy militias that have spent decades preparing for this exact moment. Tehran's Ring of Fire strategy was never designed to win a conventional war against the United States. It was designed to make the cost of such a war unimaginably high. Within minutes of an American strike, the command centers in southern Lebanon would light up. Hezbollah, possessing an arsenal of over 150,000 rockets and precision-guided munitions, would not wait for diplomatic permission. Their target would not initially be the American carriers. Those are heavily defended fortresses at sea. Instead, they would overwhelm the Iron Dome and David's Sling defense systems, raining fire on Tel Aviv, Haifa, and crucial desalination plants. The goal is mass saturation. If even 5% of Hezbollah's arsenal penetrates the shield, the civilian infrastructure of America's closest regional ally would be paralyzed. Simultaneously, alarm bells would sound across the Red Sea. The Houthis in Yemen, emboldened by years of surviving coalition airstrikes, would unleash their anti-ship ballistic missiles. We have already seen them disrupt global shipping lanes with cheap drones, but in a total war scenario, their objective shifts from disruption to destruction. They would target the logistical supply vessels, the oil tankers, and the vulnerable choke points of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. An American aircraft carrier is a formidable weapon, but it requires a massive logistical tail to operate. Sever that tail, and the beast begins to starve. Meanwhile, in the deserts of Iraq and Syria, American troops stationed at bases like Al-Assad and Al-Tanf would find themselves under immediate, relentless siege. The Islamic resistance in Iraq, a coalition of battle-hardened Shia militias, would deploy swarm tactics using suicide drones and short-range ballistic missiles. Force protection would consume all operational bandwidth, leaving American commanders with an impossible choice: hunker down and endure the bombardment, or launch massive retaliatory ground operations that would inevitably drag the United States into another bloody, protracted counterinsurgency campaign. And all of this happens before Tehran even officially declares its hand. Iran's Supreme Military Command knows that engaging the United States in a symmetrical naval or air battle is suicide. The Iranian Air Force relies on aging airframes, and their navy is dwarfed by a single American carrier strike group. But Iran's true strength lies in its subterranean fortresses. Deep beneath the Zagros Mountains, miles of reinforced tunnels house thousands of medium and long-range ballistic missiles. The Khorramshahr, the Sejil, the Imad, these are not crude scuds. They are highly accurate, solid-fueled instruments of devastation capable of striking any American installation in the Persian Gulf, from the sprawling Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar to the 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. But Iran's ultimate trump card is geographical. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow artery through which 20% of the world's daily oil supply flows. If cornered, Iran does not need to win a naval battle to close it. They only need to make it unnavigable. A combination of thousands of smart naval mines, fast attack swarm boats, and shore-based anti-ship cruise missiles would instantly transform the strait into a death zone. Insurance premiums for commercial shipping would skyrocket to impossible heights. Tankers would drop anchor, refusing to transit the corridor. Within 48 hours, the global energy market would experience a shockwave unseen since the 1973 oil embargo. Crude oil prices could easily surge past $200 a barrel, triggering hyperinflationary pressures across the globe. Stock markets in New York, London, and Tokyo would hemorrhage trillions of dollars in value as supply chains, already fragile from years of pandemic and geopolitical strain, finally snap. The economic devastation would not be confined to the combatants. It would be a collective punishment inflicted upon the entire industrialized world. European nations, still weaning themselves off Russian gas, would face catastrophic winter shortages. Developing nations would be priced out of the energy market entirely, leading to rolling blackouts, food shortages, and inevitable civil unrest. Yet, the most terrifying theater of this new war might not involve kinetic weapons at all. As missiles streak across the night sky, a silent, invisible offensive would be launched through the fiber optic cables that connect the modern world. Iran's cyber warfare capabilities have grown exponentially over the past decade. Operating from nondescript office buildings in Tehran and backed by allied hacker syndicates in Moscow and Pyongyang, they would unleash a barrage of zero-day exploits targeting American critical infrastructure. The primary targets would not be military networks, which are heavily encrypted and air-gapped. Instead, the crosshairs would fall on the soft underbelly of the American homeland, the civilian power grid, municipal water treatment facilities, and the financial sector. Imagine the chaos if traffic grids in major metropolitan areas were scrambled, or if regional power grids were shut down in the dead of winter. The psychological impact of a successful cyber attack on the homeland would be devastating, shattering the illusion of American invulnerability and forcing the government to divert critical resources away from the war effort to manage domestic crises. As the United States becomes deeply entangled in this multifaceted Middle Eastern quagmire, the geopolitical tectonic plates would rapidly shift in other theaters. The great power competitors, watching from the sidelines, would not let America's distraction go to waste. In Moscow, the Kremlin would view the conflict as a miraculous gift. With American munitions, intelligence assets, and political capital diverted to the Persian Gulf, the pressure on Eastern Europe would drastically diminish. Russia could accelerate its offensives, knowing that the Pentagon's logistical pipeline is stretched to its absolute breaking point. Furthermore, a spike in global oil prices would flood the Russian treasury with much-needed capital, effectively neutralizing the impact of Western economic sanctions. Meanwhile, in Beijing, the calculus would be even more strategic. The People's Liberation Army has spent decades studying American military deployments. They know that the U.S. Navy cannot maintain 3 carrier strike groups in the Middle East without severely compromising its presence in the Indo-Pacific. If the United States is bogged down in a multi-front war involving Iran and its proxies, the window of opportunity for China to enforce its territorial claims by force or coercion violently swings open. The leaders in Beijing might calculate that Washington, paralyzed by soaring gas prices, domestic cyber attacks, and a bloody conflict in the desert, would have neither the stomach nor the resources to fight a simultaneous war in the Pacific. This is the true danger of the first missile leaving its silo. It is never just one missile. It is the pulling of a single thread that unravels the entire global order. The escalation ladder in the Middle East has no logical stopping point. If Iran successfully strikes an American base, resulting in mass casualties, the President of the United States would face overwhelming domestic pressure to strike back even harder, perhaps targeting Iran's nuclear facilities or its leadership command bunkers. If those facilities are buried too deep for conventional bunker busters, the terrifying specter of tactical nuclear weapons enters the strategic discourse. And if the survival of the Iranian regime is genuinely threatened, they will use every weapon at their disposal, regardless of the consequences. The concept of a limited surgical strike in this region is a dangerous illusion peddled by armchair generals who have ignored the lessons of the past 20 years. War in the Middle East is a living, breathing organism. It mutates, it spreads, and it consumes everything it touches. The aircraft carriers currently slicing through the Arabian Sea represent the pinnacle of human engineering and destructive capability. The stealth bombers sitting on tarmacs, the submarines lurking beneath the waves, the satellites tracking every movement from orbit. They are all part of a massive, coiled spring waiting to be released. But military supremacy does not guarantee a clean victory. It only guarantees that the ensuing destruction will be unprecedented in scale. The diplomats may have failed, but the failure of diplomacy does not make the military option a solution. It merely makes it a tragedy. As the midnight hour passes and the dawn approaches over the ancient deserts of the Levant, the world holds its collective breath. The pieces are indeed on the board, but the board itself is sitting on a powder keg. The first move might belong to the United States, but the second, third, and final moves will be dictated by a chaotic symphony of proxies, rogue states, and opportunistic superpowers. The smoke of 1,000 intercepted rockets is just the prologue. The true horror lies in what comes after the smoke clears, when the world realizes that the fire cannot be contained and that the ashes will bury us all.